Today we are going to look at how time zones differ in North America to other regions of the world. Different parts of the world have different time zones. So this means that when it's midday for us here in the UK, somewhere across the world it's going to be midnight for somebody else in another country. Where someone else in the world it will be 7 a.m. and for somebody else it could be 5 p.m. So there are lots of different countries that will be at different points of time during their day. Why don't you just pause the video and have a think. Why do we have different time zones, and why do you think the different time zones are necessary? Because the Earth rotates on an axis, so the axis goes from the North Pole down to the South Pole and it tilts on an angle. And it rotates on this axis once every 24 hours, so it will do a full circle and turn full 360 in 24 hours, meaning that dawn and dusk, so morning and evening, sunrise and sunset, happens at different times in different places in the world, depending on which side of the globe, which side of the planet is facing the sun. So when it is daytime in one half of the world, the other half of the world that's not facing the sun will be plunged into darkness, therefore will be nighttime. If everyone followed the same time, some people would then be eating breakfast at 7 a.m. when the sun's coming up, and then everybody else would be going to bed at 10 p.m. when the sun is also still rising. Therefore, it wouldn't make sense for us to be having the same times to our day in darkness and in light. Now, from looking at previous geography lessons we've done, we know about our different lines of latitude and longitude. And we know that there is now an imaginary line that runs right the way down from the North Pole to the South Pole, and it runs through the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, London. Now, this time zone line is known as the Greenwich Meridian. Now, this line separates the east of the globe to the right of the globe, so the east and the west, just like the equator would do when it's separating our northern and our southern hemispheres. Now, the Greenwich Meridian is linked to what we call the Greenwich Mean Time, so GMT. So you might have sometimes seen on the TV in the mornings if you watch the news that it comes up at the bottom with your time, and in your time it says GMT and it tells you the time. This is linking to the Greenwich Mean Time. Now, all the time zones in the world are calculated in relation to where the GMT line is. So you are either up to 12 hours ahead of where we are, or you are 12 hours behind. Now, we're lucky because we sit along that Greenwich Mean Time. So when we compare times from our country to other countries, we know that they're either up to 12 hours ahead from us, or they're up to 12 hours behind from where we are. So let's show you how that actually works, because I appreciate that can be a little bit complicated. So here is our world map, and here are all the different time zones, okay? So here, all of the countries that are in red that follows along this zero, okay, these follow the Greenwich Mean Time. So that includes us. So our time right now is based on the Greenwich Mean Time. And the countries that are in red also have exactly the same time that we do right now. So this also includes other countries in Portugal, and we've got other parts in West Africa as well, okay? So we've got West Africa over here, and we've got some from North America. We've got some from Portugal from here as well. Now, how it works, from here, you add an hour when we travel east. So when we travel in this direction, we're adding an hour each time, depending on which time zone that country falls under. For example, in the GMT +1 zone, for example, which is +1 here, so they are an hour ahead. If it's 10 a.m. where we are, then that means that in Sweden, it's 11 a.m. So they are the GMT +1. So they're going to be +1 on top of the hour that we are. If you're going to travel west, which is in this direction, you're going to be taking away an hour each time. So if you're in the GMT -1 zone, for example, and it's 10 a.m. here in London, that means that any of the countries that appear in the -1 GMT time zone will be an hour behind. Therefore, they will be 9 o'clock in the morning. Now, all of the countries in North America have different time zones which are behind the GMT because they are to the west of where we are. That means that there's multiple different time zones across the whole continent. So, for example, Washington, D.C. here, okay, they are -5, GMT -5 time. So that means if it's 6 p.m. here in the UK, we then would count backwards. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That would make it 1 p.m. in Washington, D.C. Now, Edmonton in Canada, okay, is just in the bracket for the GMT -7. So that means if in Edmonton it's 11 p.m, we need to be counting forwards to where we are in the UK. So we've got to count forwards from 7 to 11 p.m. So it'd be 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That would make it 6 a.m. in the UK. Right, we're going to go through a few examples. Okay, I'd like you to pause the video. If you need to rewind the video to go back and learn it again, that's fine. But pause the video. Can you work out what the time would be in Mexico City, which is over here, if it was 3 p.m. in the UK? Now, if you look very carefully, it's any of the ones here that are in orange. So it actually comes under the GMT -6, okay? So we are here in the UK at 3 p.m. Can you tell me what time it is in Mexico City? So Mexico City being -6, if it's 3 p.m. in the UK, means it'll be 9 a.m. in Mexico City. Well done if you got that correct. So this actually means that children in Mexico will be starting school at the same time that we in Year 5 start packing up to go home at the end of the day. So we're almost a complete day ahead for them because they're only just starting school and you're just finishing school. Right, pause the video again. Can you work out what time it is in Cuba if it's 10:30 p.m. in the UK? Now, Cuba comes under all of these lime, orangey, yellow, green ones here, which is GMT -5. Pause the video and have a go. Okay, did you get it right? So if it's 10:30 p.m. in the UK and it's GMT -5, that means that it'll be 5:30 in Cuba. Okay, so people in the UK will be getting ready for bed at the point in time that most people in Cuba might actually be getting ready for dinner. Right, pause the screen again. Can you now work out what the time would be in Finland if it was 1 a.m. in California? So you now need to work out from California -8, and you now need to count forwards, okay, and tell me what time it's going to be in Finland. So we know that they must be -8 hours ahead. Okay, did you get it right? So California is 8 hours behind the GMT. So that's where we are in the UK. And Finland is then an extra 2 hours ahead. So the difference is 10 hours. So if at 1 a.m. it's in California and we take it back 10 hours, so 1 a.m. so we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours. That would make it 9 a.m. in the UK, therefore 11 a.m. in Finland. Okay, well done if you got that right. That was a hard one. Right, let's see if we can do another hard one. Okay, I'd like you to pause the screen and see if you can have a go at this one. So can you work out what the time would be in the Tanzania if it was 2 p.m. in El Salvador? Okay, so you know that if it's in El Salvador, we're in -6, so it's -6 to GMT time. So we've then got to go backwards. Okay, so if it's 2 p.m, see if you can then work out what it would be when you get to the UK. And then we know that it's going to be 3 hours ahead from where we are in GMT time. So El Salvador is GMT -6, and obviously GMT is then +3. So this means if it's 2 p.m. in El Salvador, it must be 8 p.m. in the UK. So we've got to be adding on to the 6. So 2 p.m, go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we get to 8 p.m. by the time we get to us. And we know that if you are on the east of the country, you are ahead of us. So we then need to keep counting from 8. So it would be 9, 10, 11 p.m. Okay, well done if you got that right. These ones are more difficult when we're looking at them on opposite time zones. So some of those were a little bit tricky. Okay, but what I would like to do is, if you need to, go back and re-watch the video. Okay, there are some activities that are attached to the sheets that you've been sent. I would like you to pick the activity you think that's most appropriate for you. So the document will explain to you which ones are the easiest, which ones are medium, and which ones are the hardest. And I would like you to pick one of them and have a go for me.